And this is where we spend 2 hours looking at our laptops going, woo.
Yep.
Yeah. So welcome one and all to next episode of Tech Poutine. A little bit of a pre-show right now, making sure everything's up and running, given that my laptop seems to be having significant Mardy.
Just a little bit, yeah.
His
laptop's almost, well, his StreamYard's completely frozen. So
yeah. So if you can hear us and see us and we're coming through fine, please let us know. Otherwise, tell us that it's going through kind of choppy. I've just eaten lunch. And as you can tell, yes, Alexander Mazzari says, on the PC World set, we have been graciously accepted by the PC World team into their offices. And Adam is flying around here. So we do have to give our thanks.
Thank you, Adam.
But it's I've been here a dozen times now, and I'm always eternally envious the fact that this is the studio I want at home. I think maybe I need to hire Adam to come set it up.
Oh, you can't afford me. I'm sorry.
So, yeah, it's been a busy week. Did I tell you this? I was having dinner with Sam Moore, IEEE Spectrum. Talking to you.
Oh, I thought you were talking to...
No. Yeah, and last night I was like, I just remembered Mercedes announced they were putting HBM into cars at the beginning of the week.
Yes.
I'd completely forgotten that was this week.
Yeah, this has been a very long week. So
if you didn't catch last week's episode, George and I spoke about a conference called ISSCC, International Solid States Circuits Conference. It's 2,500, 2,600 people?
28, I believe.
2,800 people, all in the Marriott Marquis here, downtown San Francisco. 37, 38 tracks of talks, plus plenaries, plus a demo area, all talking about the latest and greatest in circuits.
Plus, I believe actually tutorials or forums going on today.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah.
So
we're not invited to.
Yeah,
but we do have a. There's so much mind-blowing stuff came out of the event.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll have enough time before the next event to go through it all.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it took, and then we had the Microsoft announcement that dropped.
Yeah.
And so my brain was being
Yeah, we spent most of yesterday speaking with each other and a couple of experts on
what this new announcement means. And
yeah, and we'll get into it. And then we also had Apple do their announcement with an interesting modem chip that we want to talk about a little bit, just because there's been a little bit of I don't know, misunderstanding out there. But the main part of the show is what we're going to start with, and that's the big news out of ISSCC. So, with that, if everything's good with the admin, the horizontals and verticals, yep, all good.
Seems like we're good, yeah.
I think we'll get going. Quick start into today. Let me bring up my notes because they're on 18 different tabs. Okay, so start the show. Welcome everyone to the Tech Poutine, episode 19, your once every usual weekly show about chips that we just find interesting. If there's news of the day, we might cover that, but we just like talking about silicon and what's happening. My name is Ian from TechTechPotato, and joining me.
And I'm George from Chips and Cheese.
And if we had a guest here, there'd be gravy. Well, we have Adam.
Oh, am I the gravy?
You're the gravy.
Oh, great. I'll take that.
You're now our third gravy.
Oh, okay.
John
3 layers.
Okay. Sally 3
from...
times.
Yep.
Yeah, so all good.
I just, if I have a request, I'd like to not be mushroom gravy. I like sausage gravy.
You like sausage gravy?
Yeah. So
on poutine?
Sure.
Fair enough. I can't actually hear you through these, but that's fine. Yeah. So this episode, because
no.
Oh,
yeah, no. I can't hear him, and
it's turned down. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
now I can hear.
Now you should be able to hear.
Yep. All good.
Okay.
All good. So yeah, this week George and I are having our Tech Poutine in person because we're both at the same show. One that's one of the highlights of the calendar.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, we often talk about going to trade shows like CES and Computex, but it's really the research, industry research and academic research shows that we go to that I think provide the best value just because we like absorbing information.
Oh yeah. I think probably my top 3 favorite conferences of all years: ISSCC, Hot Chips, and Supercomputing.
IEDM.
I've never been to IEDM, so
Oh,
I
okay.
can't
Okay.
say IEDM.
IEDM is devices, electronic devices,
Yes.
whereas this is solid state circuits. So this year at the show at ISSCC, there's a lot of analog, and you might think that's weird because we're talking about digital processors. Turns out when digital processors want to talk to each other,
They use analog.
they use analog. It turns out the timing on a processor
Oh boy.
is analog.
Ugh.
Turns out a transistor is actually analog.
Yeah.
So we'll go into some of that, and yeah, we covered a little bit on the last show about what was going on with the itinerary for the event.
Yep.
We were both looking forward to AMD Zen 5, IBM Telum II, because at a conference like this, they will present the same stuff they did at Hot Chips or whatever, but there'll always be a slide or two.
So
That's different.
for Zen 5, it wasn't a slide, it was in the paper. The 2 little nuggets that personally I found really interesting was that they moved most of their SRAM from 8T to 6T, so you can make SRAM out of multiple transistors. 8T means you use 8 transistors, 6T means you use 6 transistors. Usually 6 transistors is actually harder to clock up, but is more dense.
Yep.
Whereas with Zen 5, they've managed to essentially transfer most of their 8T cells over to 6T. And not just that, if you remember with Zen 3 and Zen 4 for their interconnect on the L3, so to connect all the cores, they used what was known as a ring bus. Well, that's no longer a ring bus, that's now a mesh. So
even though it is technically a ring of cores, they do have the ring, but the ring has
bars between
them, so it looks like a mesh.
Yeah.
And it's funny, right? We go to things like Zen 5 Tech Day, which is meant to be geared towards the 250 press and media that attend.
Yep.
But the thing is, everybody in that room has to understand what's going on, and very few of them are engineers. So we come to a conference like this where we get 90% of the same thing.
Yeah,
but it's the 10% geared towards engineers. And just to give some perspective, this is this is what the papers look like. I mean, go through here. So literally, it's just a page of A4 paper, and then you have a few images, and that's it. And then every talk has a page and a few images, and that's kind of what that's what's going to be published in the journals as well. Right? The reason to come is for the slide deck, and the slide deck looks like your very standard slide deck, and this is all one that we want to go through. We might touch a bit more on the AMD and the IBM stuff later.
Yeah.
But the reason why we wanted this to be our first topic, SRAM, is we kind of understood before we went it was going to be an important conversation. Though I don't think it wasn't until we actually got there and started talking about what was being presented that the conversation actually took off. So let's before we get into the papers, I'll just explain what we're going to see. Because we won't go through all the slides because some of these slides are just super dense and way over my head anyway. But we are right now in the matter of a battle of process node technology. TSMC has been leading for quite a while now. Before that, it used to be Intel. And there are many metrics in which you can judge a good process node technology. Yield, the defect density is one. performance, frequency, transistor density. And sometimes we get caught up in some of these benchmarks because we're always looking at the latest and the greatest and the hardest you can push.
Yep.
And the one that consumes the most power. But at the end of the day, if you want a process node, you have to have the full scope
Yes.
of everything. And so one of the questions that has been actually I'll go this isn't working. Well, one of the questions has been, when will Intel catch back up to TSMC?
Yeah.
Now,
and at least as far as density, it looks.
Well, I was going to say, I interviewed Intel's former CEO last year, Pat Gelsinger, where I asked a very pointy question: have you bet the company on 18A?
And the answer was yes,
because historically, every foundry has bet the company on the newest process node. And there was a lot of deliberation, some of it from the east, some of it from the west, about whether Intel would be able to succeed in matching, if not beating, TSMC at a comparable foundry node. After being 3 years behind, 3 years ahead, then because of 10 nanometer getting to 3 years behind. And so that's why Pat Gelsinger famously did 5 nodes, 4 years in an attempt to at least get up and meet. And he always said that 18A was designed to be competitive with TSMC.
Yep.
Or at least be match, if not beat. And we got a little insight into that today. After all the crap that's been going on about yield since August.
Yeah.
That's a video I still need to do. I know that
so
some
many
of you
videos to make.
I know that. I actually started writing down the script for it properly. So yeah, that needs to be done. I've got other videos in the pipeline. But in this presentation is an insight into some of these numbers that we're finally going to be comparing against. And
let's start with the Intel sides first. So they're going to be sort of the second.
Are you sure? It's I kind of want to go through this in order of what happened.
Yeah.
So I'll let you talk through what we're seeing.
So I should probably pull up the slides myself.
You can see it here.
But yeah. So firstly, we have TSMC presenting on N2. Their upcoming node for
2026.
Yep. And this is using GAA-FET, or the many marketing names of GAA-FET. Here, TSMC is marketing it as nanosheet. That's a change from FinFET, which is essentially, you can think of it as 2 pillars next to each other. It is now essentially
stacked gates.
Yeah.
And SRAM here, for those of you who aren't aware, that means your L1 cache, your L2 cache, your L3 cache on die, anything that needs to store data.
Well, not just that. It's like your storage for branch predictors. Like it's everywhere in a chip. I think, what is it, 60-40, 60% SRAM, 40% logic nowadays? Something like that?
It changes all the time because SRAM and logic scaling have changed over the years. And the citation is that maybe SRAM has stopped scaling and logic continues to scale, at least in some amount. The TSMC guy, was it the TSMC guy, said scaling is back.
Yes, it was the TSMC guy.
So
we
are back in the era of Dennard scaling, people.
Well, I mean, stacks on stacks, like.
Well, hang on, we're going from 3 nanometer to 2 nanometer. That's a sizable difference.
Well, don't you know that?
Don't you know that 2 nanometer is 4 atoms?
No, I was going to say, isn't it just all marketing?
Yeah.
Oh God, that question.
It is. So the reason why it is marketing is because when we look at things like memory on a chip, L1 cache, L2 cache, L3 cache, whatever, it's a balance between density and speed. And the point of this paper is to highlight the maximum density of that memory they've managed to build on this new technology. And Intel's paper will be similar, but will have certain different points that we'll definitely get to. And through the presentation, there's the bump. This is the timeline showing planar to FinFET to nanosheet. And the outline of the talk, we're going to focus on a couple of points here, again, just because these talks are aimed at cache engineers, not us two, and not the wider audience. But we want to pick out the bits that at least we understand that make sense. So yeah, we all know that nanosheets are better than FinFETs. And this slide 8, just shows the transition going through from 130 to 3 nanometer. And lots of different new features have to appear every generation in order to drive density up. And so the idea is that if scaling has finished on SRAM, this should eventually be a flat line, but it's not. And I think also some terminology here to point out. SRAM comes in different flavors, and they're typically highlighted as 2 parts.
Mm-hmm.
You have the HD cell, which is the one here on the slide at the bottom. That's your high density, so that's your maximum density cell. And you have your HC cell, which I believe stands for high capacitance, but it's basically your highest performance.
Yes. So HC or HP, you'll see either or.
Yep.
I thought HC meant high current, but it might be high capacity. I'm not positive.
And yeah, the intricacies of what the cell looks like, but doesn't really matter. But you can see the HD cells are smaller, therefore you can pack more. And you have to, and this is TSMC's big graph, showcasing how density has improved over time. So we can see that between their 3 nanometer node and their 2 nanometer node, they're experiencing a 12% increase in SRAM. What this means for end users, for example, is that either your chip is smaller or you can put more memory on it with the hope that your workload is faster because you have more memory that's closer to the core. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of other smarts that have to go into managing large caches. You can't just add cache for free. You also end up adding latency if you're not smart enough.
Yeah. Caches are complicated.
We're in this industry. We're teaching rocks how to think.
That was a mistake.
Yeah. And with the high performance SRAM, we're seeing an 18% increase in density. So your high density goes up 12%. Your high performance density goes up 18%. It doesn't. They don't say what this is. This may just be a peak statement.
Yep.
So we have design techniques, again, kind of way of my head. There's this whole thing about negative bit lines to help drive performance. And with their high performance memory, they're doing double pumped memory. I have rant about double pumped on this channel before, but what does it mean in this context, George?
So, okay. This was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask the presenter. Unfortunately, neither the Intel nor TSMC presenter were there at the
designated Q&A session afterwards,
which kind of made me a little sad. But what double pumped means in this slide is you can, instead of having 2 ports, so you have a single port that can essentially do. Okay, here's the issue. This was one of the questions I want to ask. What does double pumped mean in this case? Because it could mean 2 ports on a 6T transistor, which means you have 2 independent. Think of doors. 2 doors that can either push out data, take in data, or one door can push out while the other is receiving. Right. So it's 2R, 1R, 1W, or 2W. So 2 reads, 2 writes, or a read and write per cycle. Or what this could mean is they're doubling the clock so that you get effectively the same behavior, but on a single port. This will matter when we go down to the Intel stuff. But if this is 2 ports, if this is dual ported, then that's actually harder to clock up than single port RAM for a single operation. So if you see the last bullet point, it says higher bandwidth and frequency max in single port SRAM for 1R, 1W operation. what that means is it's easier to clock up if you're doing 2 operations per cycle, but single port SRAM will still be easier to clock up if you're doing a single operation per cycle.
So just not to confuse the matter, porting is, as you say, it's essentially points of access. If you have a single port, you have to read and write everything through that port. If it's dual ported, you can read while you write, or do a dual read, or do it depending on what you need, and depending on how it's configured. Pumped in this circumstance, we believe it just simply means the frequency, or at least the amount of operations you can do per one clock.
Yes, which means that, so when we get down to the Shmoo plot, you'll see a clock there. Potentially, the SRAM is actually running at double that clock.
Yep.
But I'm not positive.
It's not clear. Again, we're not circuit designers, but we find this stuff pretty cool. But what this means, what we've tried to describe, what this means for this double pumped SRAM is that the Fmax, so that's the maximum frequency, of a 2 nanometer design, and I should stress here, it's the point of the bit in the bottom right that says 100 degrees Celsius. So worst case for thermals, they're getting a 6% increase in SRAM frequency. Part of that is nanosheet, part of that will be based in the design. As you see, they've got 3 points here: dual tracking scheme, nanosheet technology, and compiler knobs. What they mean is when they compile the Verilog into GDS2, which is the machine code that goes into the fab, that sort of thing. You know, just like a compiler with software, there are knobs you can tune. Dual tracking is an interesting thing that's to do with the signal as well. Also worth stating that they've also managed to decrease power. Obviously, part of the power is just simply nanosheet.
Yes,
because you can optimize how wide your nanosheets are, and that does help quite substantially. But there's also a certain amount here that they still have to manage where the power circuitry goes. But they're seeing an 11% power reduction or a 19% efficiency gain with this is their high performance SRAMs. This isn't the high density stuff, just to be clear. And this is a thing about dual tracking scheme. Basically, the best way I could describe it is this is kind of a bit like load line calibration.
Yes.
It's not, but it could be described as. Let's go into silicon results.
So this is the tape out chip. This is when you see the wafer, like the first round of wafers out of a fab, what you see is what you're seeing is you're seeing a whole bunch of SRAM chips fabbed out onto a die as test dies, right? You're checking what performance can you get out of it, what's the yields like, and
well, so some of those chips will just be, can we test logic gates?
Yep,
to work.
Absolutely.
So that's why it looks almost inconsistent in the diffraction pattern. But yeah, so this is just what they call it a standard chip with 7 metal layers, supply voltage 0.75 volts. And what's important here is that they have a 2 megabit macro and a 256-bit macro that they're testing, just to make sure that the technology works. This 256 megabit macro is what you typically see TSMC talk about with early node yields.
Oh, okay.
So there was a thing that came out late last year saying that TSMC had 80% yield.
Oh, so
on N2.
They mean 80% of this 256-bit or megabit macro.
Yes.
Okay. And for you guys, that's 32 megabytes divided by 8 for megabits to megabytes.
But a 32 megabyte macro is quite tiny.
Yep.
In 2 nanometer, and if that's yielding at 80%,
what does a bigger chip look like?
Dead.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what your yield, all that.
Just to clarify a few things here. I'm great that you guys in the comments are talking about this. So Gate All Around is the technology. The marketing name changes between companies. So Nanosheet is TSMC. Nano Ribbon
is Intel's.
Intel. MCB multi-channel something FET I keep forgetting whether it's MBC or MCB FET.
I think it's MBC FET.
Multi-bridge channel FET is Samsung's. And then IBM has their own name. It wasn't what I told you yesterday. That's a different technology altogether.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so much in the same way that we call a chip, Panther Lake or Arrow Lake, but in reality, the marketing name is Intel Core Ultra 2 or whatever.
Yeah, it's
like that basically. So regardless, it's just all gate all around.
Mhm.
And that's really all I care about, at least anyway. So this is the chip that we're going to go see the results for. This was probably done, I don't know, 6-8 months ago,
probably,
because they don't obviously put the latest out here. What we're seeing here, what this plot shows, and what the next slide shows is that it takes 300 millivolts less to write than previous. They've got a write assist feature that just reduces what's called VMIN, so that saves power.
VMIN is your minimum voltage that the SRAM will actually turn on.
Yeah, or in this case, the minimum voltage for a write.
Yep.
And this is perhaps the most important graph of the paper.
Schmooze.
Yeah, shmoo. I always want to put a C in shmoo, which means it's 6 letters. My ADHD-addled brain says that's too many letters. Actually, sidebar on this. I have difficulty remembering people's names, but I always remember how many letters are in a name. And I'll be like finding somebody, oh, they work for so-and-so. They've got 5 letters in their name. And I just know the name is 5 letters. I just can't remember the name. It's we've got a friend over here who's shaking his head. It's like, you're nuts. Yeah. Do people not think like that? Is it just me?
It's just you.
Yeah, can confirm it's just you.
It's yeah. It's like I know the CEO of Altera has 6 letters in her name. Well, I know her name's Sandra, but it's
okay, Ian. You have a beautiful mind.
Yeah. There's 2 ways I can take that, Adam. But yeah, so this is their high performance memory. So this is double pumped SRAM.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 32 kilobyte block, so not the most dense either, running at 25 degrees C. What this plot shows is that if it's green, it works. If it's red, it don't.
Yeah, basically, red is fail, green is pass.
So imagine we used to do plots kind of like this at Anantech with overclocking. We would go up, we would keep upping the frequency, and when it didn't work, we would up the voltage until the frequency worked, and we'd get this sort of stair-step pattern.
Yep.
We were doing our own shmoo plots for reviews. But this is essentially the same thing, but with SRAM, just an SRAM chip. And normally you quote what I think is like a 95% confidence value.
Yeah.
Which is why they're quoting here 4.2 at 1.05 volts rather than up here, which is 4.5 at 1.2. But this is you have yield, right, which is just basically how many chips have defects. But then you have parametric yield, which is almost a function of how you bin the chips. And this is showing, if you wanted 4.4 gigahertz at 1 volt, it's red here, but you may have 3% of chips that do it.
Yep.
And that's how you bin, and that sends up on your parametric yield as well. So,
and just to clear up, this shmoo plot is on the HC libraries, not the HD libraries. This is using the high
performance.
Yep, high performance libraries.
Yeah. So, and the high density libraries will be running at lower frequency, and power may be different.
And if you, I think 2 more slides. There we go. There's the highlights essentially.
Yeah. And this was TSMC's paper. So they were showing off their 38.1 megabit per square mil HD SRAM in 2 nanometer nanosheet gate all around technology, and their high performance SRAM on this node achieves 4.2 gigahertz at 1.05 volts, and at 25 degrees Celsius. That I think should be mentioned.
Because that's that. Foreshadowing.
But I also mentioned that one of the slides before had 100
Mhm.
degrees. So in the same way that you can say, yes, we are, I am the best Scottish player from Aberdeen who lives in the Faroe Islands, who plays for third division Argentine side. That's mainly consisting of dogs, right? It's a clarification of a clarification of a clarification of a clarification of a clarification.
Yes.
So many tendrils in how you in how you can do this. So paper 2.
Intel.
So I want to say Intel did the dirty. Sorry, both of them did the dirty.
Yeah.
One of them quoted a density of capacity per unit area, which is easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
The other one quoted cell size, which is traditional but
harder to understand
and not marketing friendly.
And on the last Tech Poutine, when we were talking about this, we both got this wrong because you said that it was Intel that was denser and I said TSMC was denser, and we were both wrong. As we were going to see, they're both the same density. So at least in terms of number of amount of SRAM per area.
Yeah. Luckily enough, they put this in the paper and they put it in the presentation, but for some reason,
they only put it in the slides, which was
okay.
Yeah. The paper was slightly different.
So for people who are asking about what's a gate all around FET, what's a ribbon FET, this is the diagram that shows that. So we used to have planar transistors on the left until Intel 22,
where it was called Tri-Gate at the time.
Yeah, it's called Tri-Gate at the time, and that's where we moved to FinFET. And then over time we've just essentially cut the fin up into little ribbons. And we can adjust the width of the ribbon, which makes them more customizable. The reason why, and I'll address this because it came up in the Q&A for some god-awful reason. And people do say, well, 18 angstrom, you can only fit like 10 atoms there. In 18 angstroms, you can. However, because we went from planar to FinFET and now to ribbon FET, the naming scheme that we used for process nodes used to mean stuff related to planar transistors.
Yeah.
And in order to keep the understanding consistent, when we moved to FinFET, instead of, because this FinFET should have been called like 28 nanometer, not 22.
Yeah.
And then 14 should have been called 20.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than talk about a feature in the node, think of it more as what an equivalent 2D transistor size would be. Now, due to quantum tunneling and a bunch of other, stuff where physics don't work, so what we're talking about here is this ribbon FET would be almost equivalent performance to an 18 angstrom planar FET. As with time goes on, that comparison becomes less true, but it's still a good explainer.
I would argue that it isn't true, but there's no good way to explain it, unfortunately.
No, it hasn't been true, I guess, since at least 10 or 7.
Yeah.
So 18A, and then going forward 14A, and then whatever everybody else is going to call their nodes. The whole point is, imagine that's how big an equivalent planar transistor would be, and imagine performance scaling linearly down to that size, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here. There are other metrics you can use, like density being one, but as we've said, you have different types of density in SRAM.
Yes.
So
you can have 6T, 4T.
No, but you can have the 38.1 or the 34.1.
Or that's actually nicely shown in the.
I'll get there as well. Yep. But this last point here, better variation and sizing options. So, so the thing that 18A provides that TSMC doesn't is this technology called backside power delivery with the marketing name PowerVia. So on the left, you see what looks like a normal chip. And just to go through it here, the blue is essentially your bulk silicon, the dark blue. And then you have the copper stuff directly above it. That's your transistors. And then you have all your connections to the transistors, which are both data and power, signal and power here. With backside power delivery, you instead create a sandwich. with transistors in the middle, signals on one side, power on the other. The idea to do this is the hope of better density because you're not mixing and matching your wires, less crosstalk, therefore higher performance. The downside being it costs more because you're now doing more, more multiple layers. Some of those benefits are shown out. This is a technology that we believe TSMC is implementing after N2.
Yes, I believe it's
Oh, no,
no.
No, there's going to be a variant of N2 with it a year later in 27.
I know for sure that A16 is going to have it, which is the node after N2.
Yeah. They all have different marketing names: Super Power Rail, Power Via. It's all backside power. There are technical differences in how it's designed. Intel's using nano TSVs, for example, and that's completely different technology, and we'll get to that in another video. But just to compare here, TSMC is just doing gate all around. Intel is doing gate all around and backside power delivery.
Now, one more slide. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to go through this?
Yeah.
Start from the top.
So what essentially GAA or gate around or ribbon FET allows you to do is it gives you less variation. So if you've ever seen the output of an oscilloscope, you'll notice that it's very rarely perfectly flat. There's a lot of indent of ups and downs and variations in the voltage reading or current reading or whatever you're reading. What ribbon FET or GAA FET allows you to have is less variation. So you have less, you're more consistent, which allows for better control of gate width and building up of the transistor.
So, just going back to this slide, your FinFETs here, the important thing here is that they're a fixed shape. With ribbon FETs, you can make it, I think Intel's actually done 6 nanometer wide, but you might have 10 nanometer wide, or 15, I'm talking about actual dimensions here, or 15, or maybe in certain circumstances, you need the characteristics of a 15 here and a 10 here. So what Intel is showing here is that this is their high performance bit cell on the bottom here, the bottom left with the ribbon FET, and you can see that the transistors, the 6 transistors in the cell, are of different sizes because you can optimize. TSMC didn't say that, but that's what they're doing as well.
And for example, why would you need a 15 nanometer wide transistor versus 6? Let's say you
driving current.
Exactly. Like the FPU side of a CPU will traditionally use more current than the SRAM will. So you would like a bigger transistor in
logic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as we can see here, Intel as well has different scalings based on high current versus high density cells. Their high density scaling is, let me pull up a calculator so I can put that into the same units. About 12%.
And the high performance is about 25.
It's a 13.6% for the high density and almost 30% for the high performance cells.
Yeah, all good. So you can also adjust the size of your ribbons for your optimized voltage as well, which is another one of these slides. Some more optimization here again.
No, this is interesting.
Wait, which one?
One more. There we go.
Yeah.
Power Via. Actually, let's talk a little bit more about where they're using it. They're actually not using it in the bit cell because they don't see much improvement within the actual SRAM bit cell itself.
Hang on. I think here you have to explain what you would normally do with a bit cell. So normally with a bit, like as we said before, with gate all around, you have your signal and your power above the transistors. And typically in a regular bit cell, you would have some of your power delivery into the bit cell itself.
Not usually, that's on the edges.
Well, this is what this is getting at, right? I'm talking about a traditional bit cell.
Well, no, even in the, so traditionally you have your bit cell array, which is all of your, essentially where your data is stored, and then around that bit cell you have your logic, and where you see the implementation of PowerV is actually in the logic, not in the SRAM itself. That's actually the next slide.
Yeah, no, what I was getting at here is there are multiple, you still have to apply power to the bit cell.
Yes.
Right. And there are multiple ways to do it. The thing is, you have, in some instances, you have to put power vias in. And if you're in a high density scenario, those power vias can actually decrease the density or increase the bit cell size. I initially, during the presentation, misread this slide. But what it's saying, going from left to right here, on the left is without power via, on the right is with power via, and it turns out adding power via at this level of granularity to the bit cells rather than doing it traditionally actually decreases the density, and there's only a minor voltage drop as a result. So what ends up as George said, what they do is they keep the bit cell array consistent, but then put the power vias in the logic. Which makes sense. So you have gate all around everywhere, but then your backside power delivery around the edges. This is also about that changes the design slightly. So you have read delay and voltage drop, and they were just basically saying here that the way they've managed to construct it, no degradation. Essentially, there's a small increase in voltage drop, but it's within tolerance basically. And then we get into the section that's kind of like what we saw with TSMC, this whole negative bit line optimization. But here's an interesting graph, slide 23. Do you want to walk us through this?
So what this is basically, what this is showing is the different densities you can get depending on the bit cell how many bits you fit into essentially an array of the SRAM.
So hang on, I'll go back to this slide, slide 19. What you're seeing here is your SRAM's macro, essentially 256 bits by 128 bits. But you can make those bigger and smaller.
Yes.
And the thing is, this periphery doesn't grow linearly with the SRAM size, so you get overall a different density.
Yeah. So if you increase the bit width, bit
line, word line.
Thank you. You can increase or decrease your density, not linearly, but you do start to see drop off as you increase those bit line and word line sizes.
It also means that the benchmarks you take at these different densities. So at the top here, we've got the 38.1, which is actually the megabits per square mil, which is the same as TSMC.
Yes.
That's where we got this from. But realistically, I think it looks like Intel is taking most of its data from the 34.3 megabit per square mil. And as you can see, the bit line is halved and the word line is halved.
It's basically the macro that they showed up above.
Yeah. But, and again, when you design a chip, it's a trade-off, right? Do you need the highest density, or do you need to relax the density a bit for performance? This is why density is such a stupid metric, because it's also a function of performance.
Yes.
And again, performance could be like your flops, or it could be your energy efficiency, flops per watt or flops per dollar.
Yep. And then if you scroll down or to the, there we go. As you can see, you can have different essentially.
Oh, no, explain what this is first.
Oh, so this is their test chip. This is equivalent to what we showed for the TSMC slides. This is showing.
But rather than doing two different chips, like what TSMC did for their high density and high performance,
they did one.
They did one where they're interleaving. And I've seen pictures from Intel to do with their SRAM testing for years. This isn't new. This is how they do their different blocks.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's showing that they have here their bit cell areas and their macro configuration. and we get similar plots to what we saw with TSMC about how they reduced minimum voltage. The thing here, though, is this bit on the top of the graph.
Yeah.
What does it say, George?
So the bit at the top of the graph says negative. Well, it says 256 megabit, 50 megahertz at negative 10C.
So, one, you're not going to be running your memory at 50 megahertz. Two, you're not going to be running your memory at negative 10 degrees Celsius.
Yep.
So even though they've seen a 100 millivolt improvement in their VMIN, and this is without read and write assist, which will come in.
It is actually assisted.
No, this is this is assisted. But
I see. Without read assist, it's actually more than 100 millivolts down versus the prior node with read and write assist. Okay, I was misinterpreting the. Yep.
And we can go to the high performance again, a similar level of VMIN reduction, but also at negative 10 degrees. And this is the point of contention we were talking about after the presentation. We didn't really go into it much in social media, but we didn't notice this on the slides as they came out.
Mm-hmm.
You noticed this in the paper afterwards.
Yeah. So if you go down to the next slide, this is what a lot of people got excited about, and rightfully so. What this is showing is that this specific macro can do 5.6 gigahertz at 1.05 volts. However,
which sounds 25% better than TSMC.
Yes. However, this may be single port SRAM, but that's not the big question that I had. This may be at negative 10C. And if you look at the paper, there's a separate shmoo graph of, instead of HEC voltage, they show their high density voltage.
Mm-hmm.
That tops out at 3.56 gigahertz, but it's at negative 10C. So I'm really wondering if this was run at negative 10C as well, which does change characteristics. As you know, as who used to do LN2 overclocking, you know that bringing your temperature down can significantly change behaviors in the transistors. So
this is also a 94.5 megabit cell, not a full 256.
Yes.
And that's a little bit weird. It is the 256 136-bit design with similar macros. But it means that this frequency and this voltage that we have here is not comparable to TSMC's.
Which is why when people are saying, oh, 18A is so much better than N2, it's like, okay, wait, we don't have enough information to confirm that. And as we'll see with something else, you don't necessarily need newer processes to get similar densities in SRAM.
It's definitely a topic for a dedicated video once we clear everything out and make sure we get everything aligned. Like, as you say, neither the Intel nor the TSMC people were available for comment after the presentations. They decided they'd had enough and left the conference already.
To be fair, it was a long day. So
it's a long day for us. They were likely there just to present their stuff and go. But no, let's not take away from the fact that both companies have 38.1 megabit per square mil high density SRAM.
Like this is an amazing feat on both companies' parts. Like let's not take away from that.
Yeah. So with that, I'm gonna skip over MediaTek's paper because that's something very specific to networking. And what slides do we need for the
if the slides would load?
117. No, I've gone too far.
Come on. No.
103, 104. Here we go.
There we go.
So the fourth presentation on this session was from Synopsys. If you don't know who Synopsys is, they build software that both helps you design a chip, but also emulate and simulate and validate. And they're in the process of acquiring ANSYS, which is a physical simulation software company, so you can also simulate the thermals, and their big thing right now is talking about how to enable chiplet design properly, but also enable machine learning in chip design. They recently just announced a new simulation and two new platforms, one simulation, one emulation, I believe. I have to look at my notes, but both using the latest Xilinx Versal FPGAs, so you can simulate many billions of gates and transistors on your FPGA for your silicon bring up. Again, I've started writing the script for that video. That's pretty cool, and they're actually going to have an event here in the Bay next month that I'm going to.
Oh, fun!
So I may get to see that in person. As always, yeah, it's the big Chungus FPGAs. They also have an IP business because obviously, if you use Synopsys software to design your chip, you may not have everything you need to build the full thing from a IP perspective. So Synopsys provides a bunch of IP, high-speed SerDes, logic, RISC-V cores, and they also have to partner with all the other IP companies and all the foundries to ensure that they have the right process development kits for each node. So in this instance, they've developed some IP for SRAM.
And our title is a 38 megabit per millimeter squared, 380/540 millivolt dual rail SRAM in 3 nanometer FinFET technology.
So the key point here is 38 megabit per square mil. So same as Intel and TSMC on 3 nanometer FinFET.
And they wouldn't say what 3 nanometer, but it was very, very heavily hinted that it was TSMC's N3 process.
Yeah. So even though we're talking about extreme density on N2 and 18A, turns out with the right level of optimization, you can also get it on N3.
Yeah.
This paper was quite dry from a us perspective because it was all about circuits. So, I mean, they have some plots that don't really make much sense. This is talking about read and writes and using their dual rail design, and this is their test chip where they got the density and array efficiency.
But if you notice, the Fmax of this it was at 25C with and it got 2.325 gigahertz. So
the question I had on Twitter when I was posting this is okay, so we see 4.2 gigahertz from TSMC and 5 point whatever from Intel, and 2.3. Don't chips run at 6 gigahertz today?
Some chips do, some chips don't.
Doesn't the L1 run at the same frequency?
Yes.
So the reason why it works out and we don't see like the 6 gigahertz value is that it takes 3 cycles to read from SRAM.
Yeah.
But you also have other features like buffering, associativity.
Well, you say that, but like I was mentioning earlier, SRAM is also used in BTBs, and that's single cycle most of the time.
Yeah.
So you do have to run the so it's complicated.
Or maybe it's double pumped, and therefore it's not really running at 4.6. It's really running at 9.2. It's that sort of stuff that goes on. And the reason why this SRAM is dense, as best as I can understand it, and I didn't really understand it, is because in their bit cell, which in this case looks like the thing on the right, which is a bit bigger, but still retains the density, is that they've replaced a lot of their PMOS transistors with NMOS, which are smaller.
Oh, interesting.
And that's how they're getting the density.
Okay.
If you know what that means, then good for you. And they had some diagrams. This was actually one of the shortest talks I attended. Yes. It says 11 of 12, but 12 is a conclusion. Page 1 was the title.
Yeah.
So really, it's only 10 pages of stuff. And the whole 380 millivolt, again, is to do with their architecture and how they're doing it. So, so we had a battle of SRAMs at the conference. We don't really want to go into the MediaTek stuff just because that's a little bit off the wall. but that caused the biggest commotion on social media, I think. This set of papers.
Indeed. Lots of comparisons went up when lots of people comparing one versus the other, and there, to me, there really wasn't enough information to compare.
Well, I mean, at least we have something, I guess.
Yeah, I guess at least for the Intel's perspective, it proves that their process can do it. Like their process can do the same density as TSMC's and can clock very well given certain
parameters. Yeah.
Yes. So it's
I mean, again, come back to the whole argument of can Intel at least match TSMC?
Yeah,
in this generation, and given that 18A is scheduled to ramp up this year,
yes,
with Panther Lake, and then Clearwater Forest in Q1, would give them a 12-month lead.
Well, it would give Intel Intel product a 12-month lead.
Yes.
A question that Intel still needs to sort of answer is when will their customers get it? So
the whole Intel Foundry thing. It's
but I will say that it does look good for both 18A and N2. So that's better nodes means better products usually. So
so I can't actually share the session with the AMD slides because this platform has a limit of 50 megabytes.
Well, if you could just show the paper. The paper is the more interesting of the two. So if you want to go back to the
I can't zoom in because of this platform.
Well, that's fine. That's fine.
So
go back. There we go. So if you can read at the top right, the first sentence, which is well, let me pull it up myself.
Let me see if I can do it differently.
So the first sentence of the paragraph of the first paragraph on the right side, the first sentence is the Zen 3 and Zen 4 L3 ring fabric topology is replaced by a mesh topology which reduces latency and increases bandwidth, especially for configurations with high core counts. So what I suspect, because previously AMD called their ring an optimized ring, what I suspect they did was they probably likely had so if you've seen a Zen 5 CCD before, or Zen 4 or Zen 3, there's 8 cores in it, 4 cores on top, 4 cores on bottom. In a ring, usually what would happen is you'd connect the top rows, the top row of cores and the bottom rows together.
I'm showing this slide, so it's
okay.
Sideways.
So yeah, you can see usually it would just be that top set and bottom set that would be cross connected. I think in previous generations there was actually a connections between the 4 cores in the middle, but they were not fast pathed or the full bandwidth that the traditional ring is. I think with Zen 5 they've made those the full bandwidth along with essentially fully fledged members of the interconnect, and that's what they're calling their mesh fabric.
This presentation again went into some performance comparisons. And I know I'm going through slides pretty quickly here. This is one of the new slides. Talking about switching power and how they improved switching power per IPC, which is a really weird metric, but whatever. And this is the breakdown of how the power ends up in the clock tree and performance tree. There was also spoke about Vcache being upside down. It's I do have a failed AMD's Australian CPU thumbnail about that one. But one of the things here was SRAM density.
So if you go back 2 slides, there we go. It's actually really interesting that despite essentially staying in the same node family, TSMC's excuse me, Zen 4 was on TSMC's N5 node, and Zen 5 is on TSMC's N4 node. A little confusing, but they managed to get a 30% bump in cache, essentially cache density, despite there being a very small node change, which is actually really impressive and goes to show that just the node itself isn't everything.
Yeah, physical design can give you an extra node improvement if you do it well. That's why that's why DTCO, design technology co-optimization, exists, and then system technology co-optimization exists beyond that.
And they managed to squeeze, what is that, 30% more transistors in the same area?
Yep. Yeah, so the CCX in this case is 7.9 billion, but the whole chiplet itself is 8.6.
And the CCX is essentially everything's below the SMUs. So just the cores, the L2 and the L3.
Yeah. And they went through some of the optimizations they actually did in terms of custom logic, and like I say, DTCO and buses.
And you can see the 8T to 6T transition there on the slides.
Yeah. And this is architectural breakdown for IPC uplift here, and then 512-bit support, and then most of the stuff that we've seen before. That was aside from the SRAM, it was this session that we're going through right now. And they did some liquid nitrogen demo, and we had some great chat with the other one. I think the other one we're talking about is Telum II. Because there were some small updates here. They do like talking about miles of wire.
Maybe so that 24 miles of wire. If you don't know, a marathon is 26.2 miles long. Maybe next time they'll get over a marathon.
And they spoke a little bit about the metal stack as well, because this is Samsung 5 nanometer. This is and the previous generation was Samsung 7. Went through some of the topology. They went through some of the buses, how they connect to each other, security. Also, these things have to. This is one of the big things, right? So, both George and I have presented that this new chip, they went from 8 lots of 32 megabytes of L3 cache to 10 lots of 36, which is a 40% increase overall. But going from 32 to 36, like we said in the beginning about the SRAM talk, that doesn't come for free.
No,
there's a penalty because you have to essentially walk through the memory. I mean, I know that's not exactly how it works with associativity and stuff, but that causes extra delays. And you want to build big SRAMs that are fast. So they only increase the access time by a cycle.
Yeah,
going from 90 average. Going from 19 to 20.
Yep, 20 cycle latency for the L2, which in Telum 2 and Telum 1, we actually have an article on this. It also behaves as the L3 chip, as the L3 for the chip. We have an article on that on Chips and Cheese. But yeah, it's a very interesting cache design.
To be honest, one of my best videos on the channel is talking about what they did in Telum 1 regarding virtual cache. Let me see if all of this is L2 cache. So 360 megabytes of L2. That also just happens to be your L3. And then we get into circuits.
So
they spoke about the ring. So they call this a ring. If it was AMD, they'd call it a mesh.
Yeah. So
the widths aren't the color isn't representative of the bandwidth.
Yeah. But what's interesting here, because I asked this question because it seemed low to me, but the 352 gigabytes per second ring, that's the full bandwidth of that interconnect, which is very low. For comparison, AMD's ring can do 1 point something terabytes per second in Zen 5.
Is that cross-sectional, or is that just
that's measurement from that's the entire, essentially running all of the L3, getting the bandwidth out of the L3,
Yeah. Okay. So it's cross sectional, whereas they're talking about point to point.
No, that's the whole bandwidth of the ring total.
Mm.
I asked, and I was like, this seems very low. And he's like,
so I mean, I met some of my the people I work with at IBM there. Did you speak to the high speed guy?
I talked to the person who gave the presentation.
Yeah, no, you have to speak to the high speed guy.
Okay.
Um,
because it does 352 gigabytes per second does feel really low.
Yeah.
So that's why I was asking that question.
Mhm.
But yeah, maybe I talked to the wrong person.
Yeah. And I went through some of the physical design they did to decrease the size of the core, because they fit 10 cores in the size of 8. Even though there is a process node shrink, they said that only did some of it. And they also reduced core power. They did this really interesting calculation. Let's see if I can find it. No, I can't see it. Did they take it out of the slide deck, or did they add it back in?
What slide?
Didn't they say that with all the changes they'd made, they'd expected a 1.5x increase in power, and they only made it 5% power? I'm pretty sure that was this talk. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe I'm thinking of a different talk. Either way, they managed to only increase the power slightly. Oh no, it was Telum. It was another Telum talk.
Yeah, was it the one
session 37?
37.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, that's one of the other things they do. We won't go into that because that's a whole another whole rabbit hole to go down. That isn't just simply about chips. So those were the main talks that we had. That actually, shall I bring up?
Do you want to bring up the Intel one with the chiplets?
Yes. Which session was that?
That's actually the same session, session 2.
Oh, okay. Let me do this again. Window. Yeah.
Scroll.
Yeah. There was a. It was after this one, wasn't it?
I think it was before.
There
it is.
Yeah, this was a very unexpected presentation. If all you do is focus on product.
Yeah, and I saw this title. I was like, is this Falcon Shores? No, this is not Falcon Shores.
Hang on. What in the title made you think it was Falcon Shores?
So, two things really. 300 megabyte SRAM and 20 chiplets.
So there's also 20 terabytes per second bandwidth, 2.5D.
Yeah.
So advanced packaging, even though we know Falcon Shores is more than 2.5D, just general advanced packaging. And also scalable heterogeneous system across chiplets.
Yeah.
Which is almost Ponte Vecchio-esque as well. So we wanted to, we went in this thinking, what the hell are they talking about? Now, we got access to the slides at the beginning of the session, so we had already kind of gone through them. Turns out it's not Falcon Shores.
Yeah. They do bring up Ponte Vecchio, but this is quite far from that.
Yeah. So the whole point here is that right now we're in an era where chiplets is starting to become a thing. You know, AMD chiplets, Intel chiplets. And we have standards like UCIe that are coming out. And one of the benefits of chiplets is, IP reuse and using it in multiple products. The only problem is that if you want to connect a bunch of chiplets together in a configurable way that's reusable, that in itself, the construction process is reusable.
Yes.
That doesn't really exist.
So AMD actually talked about this at the MI300 launch about how they basically
had to
reuse, like they reused their Zen 4 CCD in both desktop, server, as well as an MI300A, despite it being 3D stacked. So they had a there was a lot of optimization that went into the trying to find where they could put all that while keeping
within the
the
design parameters of
Yeah.
all the products.
Yeah, they were really talking about it. It was really interesting, and it just goes to show that if you don't have a standard basis, like standard base, then sometimes you end up with
Well, that's the thing. That
specialized chiplets anyway.
well, so their whole thing is we keep the chiplet the same
Mhm.
and the base changes.
Yes,
The argument for this paper is the base is the same and the chiplets change.
yes.
So what you're seeing here is a configuration where if you have a package and you have a base chiplet, an interposer,
Mhm.
As long as you define the specifications of what can connect to the interposer, whether that's memory, computer, accelerator, as long as they adhere to the specifications, just like a PCIe card
Yep.
is meant to fit in every PCIe slot. I mean, it fits in the slot.
Well,
Whether it works in the slot is
well, I was going to say, well, depending on the slot size, which interestingly enough is also covered here.
yeah.
But
Also, you also have to make sure that your slot is rated for particular power delivery.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
And
then you have drivers.
Yeah.
So there's multiple layers to this thing.
Gunny, I like what you say in chat. Legalization of architecture. I'm going to use that from now on. So thank you.
Well, I mean, the whole thing about PCIe is it acts like Lego brick, right? Stick,
Yeah.
block, stick.
Yeah.
With chiplets like this, if you can have a unified base design, and in this case, have it half compute, half memory, or have some accelerators.
UCIe is trying to act like that piece, like PCIe, in terms of the interconnect and the protocol between the chiplets.
Not the protocol.
Is it not?
No,
I thought
it's just an electrical interface.
Oh, I thought that they had a protocol too.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. But the point here is, I think this slot, this chip thing in the bottom left, right? Ignore the fact that it says CS. The whole point here is that if you have a grid of 4x5 connection points, as long as you keep every chiplet within a range of specified power and bandwidth, and that your interposer can manage the connections between the two, you can have essentially, I mean, I'm not sure with Lego bricks, like we used to call them like 4x2s and 2x2s based on how many studs they had at the top.
Yeah, UCIe does have a protocol. I was pretty sure that it did.
No, it supports protocols. But
yeah,
it's not designed to be run on its own. The UCIe protocol is implementation specific and consists of either CXL or PCIe.
Yeah, no. It defines the physical layer.
It defines the model. It doesn't provide the protocol itself.
We're okay. We're gonna have to discuss this after, but
yeah. So having a mixture of chiplets on top, some of them can be big, some of them can be small. That's what this paper was about, and they actually did some testing. Where's the image that they had that I want to show? Maybe it was in the paper. The whole point here is that you can mix and match, basically. This config was 4 TSMC, 4 compute and 16 memory. Interesting thing here is they made the compute chiplets on TSMC 16.
Yeah, I think really what they're trying to show here is that they can take multiple foundries, more than just two.
Yeah.
Right, because you have TSMC 16, Intel 4, and UMC, which is another fab 130 making the base tile, and put them all into the same chip.
Yeah, and you can play. Yeah, you can just play mix and match. With how many? Maybe you want a chip that only has 10 total chiplets. Maybe you want one that has 15. Now, the only other thing here you have to think about is the heat spreader and the power delivery.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the base tile itself could handle the power delivery.
I know, but if you only have say 2 tiles,
and
your product is only 2 tiles versus a product that has 20.
Yep.
Right. Your power delivery for those 2 tiles are probably overkill. If they're like one
sure
stud.
Yeah.
Size. So, just to be clear, this was a pseudo AI type design, with using 10 silica RISC cores for compute, and then
we were talking about double pumped, and now we have quad pumped.
Yeah, the connectivity between the chips is quad pumped.
I actually think it is quad pumped in the traditional sense because
Mhm.
it's 2 gigahertz, whereas the chips only go up to 500 megahertz. So I think it is quad pumped in the traditional
Interconnect.
sense of 4x the clocks. They're 4xing the clock speed.
Yeah, and the idea here is that corner connectivity is different to edge, which is different to central, and that's something that all chiplet designs have to manage when you do it in literally a pure grid array. To be honest, I think companies that are doing pure grid arrays with chiplets without like a centralized I/O, or at least a connected I/O subsystem, need to have their head checked. But again, this is just essentially, can we do it? Can we do it? And ResNet 50, which is not a good benchmark, but it is a benchmark, and they just showed off that they could do it, and that was an interesting paper, nonetheless.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can.
Do you want to session 37?
Let me see if I can bring up this. For some reason, it's cut the top off, and I don't know why. No.
Yeah, Dom in the chat, you get ResNet or Cinebench. Choose your poison.
Yeah. Oh no, it's not cut the top off. That's just my graphics being crazy. You can't see it, but at the top they have different die designs.
Yep.
So, okay, let's go to the next one. Let me load this up. This is this was a surprise.
Yeah. So this was beyond just the session 2, which was the processors, and session 29, the SRAM presentations. This was sort of a one that surprised me with just how interesting it was. Apparently, Ian's laptop is having a bit of a.
It won't even load a PDF.
Yeah, it's having a bit of a hissy right now. So let me pull it up on my system and we can talk about it.
Hang on.
If I can find the paper.
It's I've sorted them all out. So
I didn't download. Oh no, I did download. Okay, good. So the first paper was from IBM.
I've loaded it now. I can.
Okay, cool.
I can present.
The first paper was from IBM, and this is actually what you were talking about earlier. This is where they were talking about DTCO, or design technology co-optimizations, which for IBM is performance, power, and area, the traditional PPAs, but also reliability, because they have an 8 nines SLA, which means that their uptime is 99.999999%.
Yeah.
So reliability for IBM Z and Telum is very, very important. And
yeah, so this is what their example. If they get a 1,000 mega electron volt neutron hitting a silicon atom, causing alpha fragments or magnesium 25 ions to go attack gates, how do we enable parity in latches, not just memory, but in control circuitry? So they have to develop their latches to be able to do that, and they actually saved a bunch of latch power by creating new types of latches in their system. So that was pretty good. Here's the chip impacts. So we covered it earlier. Die size is up because they have more cores. However, it is on 5 nanometers, so you should see a shrink. Transistor count up 38%. Wire length up 28%. Got to get in your 24 miles of wire. Frequency of 15%. This should have been 1.53x power growth, but they did it in 5% due to all these improvements. And again, this is what comes down to co-design. So it's not just design technology. There's also the co-optimization is their point. However, that's a point that most other companies have been making for at least 5 years now. So the 2 other small things we should talk about, because I've got videos on these coming out. One of them is wearable electronics. So
weave a network.
Yeah. Stop pulling on the thread.
Yeah, we were many puns could be made.
Riffing on what topology do you want your
Would you like
what top do you want, a ring or a torus?
no, would you like a knot? I would like a knot, please.
A knot, yeah. So this is just simply how do you put really small compute and how do you connect it together without needing expensive interposers, but also using a control system that can essentially load itself. Yes, there's people are moving stuff on the floor upstairs, and scraping it along the floor. So we spoke to this. This is done by a research group out of Virginia, in collaboration with a defense company. Turns out military is a good use for this stuff.
I wonder why.
So I did ask, okay, so you've got Cortex M0 SoCs and you've got these routers, and then you can connect to thermal sensors or Bluetooth or cameras, for example. Where's the battery? And she said, the PhD student who was leading the paper and gave the presentation, it's like, imagine sewing a flexible one into your collar or into the seam of your shirt. And yeah, with the right design, you expect it to last at least a day. Maybe do some data gathering that you can download later. And in a military, I mean, for a personal use case, imagine taking the lovely stuff from shop.techtechpotato.com and having LEDs in the wafer.
Well, okay. Here's a crazy
t-shirts.
idea.
Yep.
Well, okay, so you have the battery, right?
Mhm.
Well, you put off heat.
Mhm.
Everyone puts off heat. Well, what if you somehow had if the electronics were low power enough, you could in theory have essentially a heat capture system.
A thermal harvesting,
Yeah.
electrical harvesting system.
Yeah.
I said that. She said that's possible.
Oh, that's yeah.
The question is, harvesting systems are typically nanoamps, microamps if you're lucky. So being able to power a full, you may have to wear it for 3 days before you get a charge of 1.
Okay.
So it would keep, and then there's obviously the added cost. Part of the thing here is that it has to be cheaper if it's commercial. If it's military, then whatever the cost, right?
Yeah. Well,
So-
that's sort of what I was thinking was military for long-term deployment. If you put in a GPS, essentially tracking.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the other thing. The minute you start putting in radios as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I don't know how much power a simple GPS sensor would take.
I don't know.
And well, again, it's like, oh, well, how much is a coin cell battery and stuff? But then I guess if you're in the field and you've got these electronics on you, maybe they're giving off heat and you can see them in thermal again. So that's a thing you have to consider.
Well, it shouldn't be putting out very much power. So I can't imagine that the thermal would be very high.
I know.
Anyway.
But the point here is that these BiSpy routers, so they're using SPI protocol, but they're essentially muxes. So you can downstream multiple chips and connections down the line. So in this case, in the diagram on the bottom, your SoC chiplets are in this greeny color. Then the BiSpy chiplets are in blue. Your muxes. But the idea is that these chiplets can either chain boot together or boot individually.
Okay.
Also, there's 2 different clocks in the system, one for wake up and one for actual performance. Yeah, so there's a fast clock at 50 megahertz and a slow clock at 180 kilohertz. They use an LDO for power. It's only 0.2 square mils at 1.1 volts. Cortex M0 with some SRAM. M0, right? It's meant to be as a microcontroller. People have done similar sort of stuff with electrical inks and flexible electronics. There's a company in the UK, or there's a fab in the UK that does that. A company called Pragmatic that I've spoken about before on this channel. And they actually went into detail about how everything works, power delivery and what they needed to do.
They really talked about they're very proud of the BiSPI protocol.
Yeah, in order to get this to work. Yeah, global boot up and clock sync. So they actually went through all the signals here, what happens, proper design diagrams. Here are the 2 chips that they
Ooh.
designed. So there's a different array of pads, and the pads can come out. And this might be a setup where you can do.
Mhm.
You have the first SoC chip, then you have a couple of BiSPIs, and then this is on a different system. And so this is a sense of measurements, and they can show when the clock moves from chip to chip and how it cleans up, and because obviously you're putting a clock over a thread, electrical thread, essentially. I think they said it was 25 micron thread, but it's specially designed to be woven into fabrics.
Mhm.
And so you can do that, and so this is the yarn, special yarn, and they have a flip chip system because they literally flip the chip and then bond it on. This is how it looks, in a. So it's literally super tiny, and the only way the only reason you notice this is a thing is because the yarn is different colored to the garment, right? And this is a demo that was showing off with dumpers and testing, and this is again the demo that they had in the environment. And I actually had some pictures of it. Maybe we'll get to that in a second. And then the other one that we found interesting, again, one that I've already recorded a video on, is the one after this.
Here we go.
So,
again, almost it's very similar to the Intel paper that we covered. This is a reusable. Really, it's a standardized interposer, I would call it, because you wouldn't take the interposer, put chips on it, then take the chips off and put new ones on. You would just make a ton of the same interposer and then reuse that in different places.
The difference here is that one, this interposer is an active interposer.
Yes,
it has memory, it has control, it has power delivery in it. Two, it's done by a research group in a relatively new process node. WTF. So normally we expect chips from research groups to be in 65, 90, 130. They've had access to leading edge, or at least leading for embedded stuff. So basic concept of an interposer, you just put some silicon on it, you make it active by adding power, IO, and memory. But you still have to do microbumps and TSVs, and you have to enable your substrate. And then reusability. You were talking about chiplets and reusability. They're essentially copied from AMD's last year presentation. But with a reusable interposer, you suddenly create a standard. They even bring up on this slide on the left is NVIDIA's AI dev chip using a 6x6 grid array of really small chips. But then, they're also talking about AMD Vcache here as well. And then not only that, you also have designed the chip so it actually does work. So again, because machine learning is of the highlight, but this is what they've designed, and this is quite dense. The important things to look at here is that they have what they call at the top of the green. They have a H-link fabric, which allows for chips to communicate to each other. They have a V-link fabric, which allows the chips to communicate to the memory on the interposer. And then they also have a voltage regulator and high-speed IOs and low-speed peripherals for external communications. This just makes it a little bit more complex. This is how the networking topology works. This is how they deal with signaling. I actually think it's better if I crack out some of the images here. So this is a good image, but what we're seeing here, this is actually two interposers. They've kind of just smoothed out the grid here. But what you have is a series of 8 top dies on the interposer. Each one of these top dies, I think they said, was a RISC-V core and an AI core on it. But the transistor technology So for the base interposer and actually no, I think it's in the paper now. The chip's on top of 28. The interposer is 65. What's important here, I think, one, the energy efficiency is really low, 0.14 picojoules per bit.
Yep.
That's actually really, really good for this sort of thing. But when we speak about putting chiplets on top of interposers, how close the connections are, especially if you're using micro bumps, is called the bump pitch. And it's a measure of leading edge technology. What was Lakefield? If you remember that was Intel's 1P core, 4E cores.
45, 55?
That was a 55 micron bump pitch Foveros design. This academic team is doing 40 micron bump pitches.
That's
insane.
That's up there with I believe, if I remember correctly, RDNA 3 used info at bump pitch of 40.
So it says here the third column is MI300 on 9 micron.
So
this one at the end using 22 FFL, an Intel process.
Yep.
Is on 50 micron.
So
that might actually be late. No, 2020. That's too late for Lakefield, I think.
So the bump pitch on the MI300A, if they're talking about the vertical stacking, is 9 micron, but the actual bump pitch between the interposers is 40 or 45.
Yeah. But this is, of the leading edge density. There's one here with 20. Don't really know what that chip is.
It's JSSC.
Yeah. But let's see if I can bring the photos up of this. Let's see. Because this is one of the demos. Let's share screen, share window. That didn't share anything.
No. So,
I know why. This program doesn't like showing it off. Let's just show it in. I always thought I couldn't right-click something there.
Here we go.
Yeah, and there we go.
So there's the chip.
Yeah, and you can tell it's chip number 45 because it says 45. But we have here the 8 compute chiplets on top of an interposer and then 2 interposers. They did say that the interposers actually communicate to each other just through package.
Okay,
there isn't anything special.
So through C4 bumps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like AMD connects IO die to chiplets, and that's the standard. This is what the back of the chip looks like. Which this is the professor who's in charge of the group. Okay, can we get a photo where I'm making a face and he's looking at the camera?
Eating the chip as usual.
Yeah.
Quick question: what did it taste like?
When it's got lots of little bits in it, it can be quite tasty. So sometimes you need a monolithic piece of thing that you can really crack into, like a nice tempered chocolate. But sometimes you just need a bit more texture.
Have you ever chipped any teeth on one of these bites?
So Broadcom.
Yeah.
Okay. So
one of the things we're not talking about. I wonder if this will open in the same window or if no, that's paint. And now it won't right click.
It invokes the fifth. Yes.
Let's share a different screen. That one. So What are we seeing here, George?
So this is Broadcom's Tomahawk 5. I almost forgot the name there. Chip. This is their 51.2 terabit per second switch chip.
So this goes at the top of a rack in a data center, and it's the highest bandwidth, highest performance.
And
Tasty.
the date here, right? They're
it's
showing
2.5 years old.
It's 2.5 years old. Yeah, they're showing it off at a conference now. So the next one's probably already deployed.
Yeah, or coming out very soon.
Yeah.
And
hang on. So this is how the chip is packaged. It's in a big metal container that weighs about 2 pounds, and that's because the stuff around the outside is optical. So optical connections, and because they're sensitive, you need. So yeah, let's. So we can see it, and it's all nice and pretty. And this is
all your BGAs belong to us.
Yeah, this is at least 10,000 BGAs. So this is me.
Yeah.
Having a bite, having a bite, bash my teeth into it, didn't I?
Oh no! On the pin side?
No, on the metal side.
Oh man!
I've done that with a Cerebrus wafer scale.
Oh no.
Again, it's you rarely handle these things. If it's a small chip, right? Then okay, whatever. If it's a big chonker because it's got a massive package on it, then yeah, that can happen.
Whoops. That's why you just smell things.
This is why we can't
I
take
smell
them
things.
anywhere.
I don't put them in my mouth.
Well, no, it's funny. The person who was meant to be at the Broadcom booth wasn't at the booth at that time.
Oh.
Nobody was there, so I got free reign.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, but it's lots and lots of pins, lots and lots of stuff. So let's we are going long already on this topic, so
Microsoft.
So let's stop here and have our call to action, because we provide this content for free and nobody sponsors us. So if you can, please like and subscribe. You've got here this channel here at TechTechPotato. George,
as well as at Chips and Cheese. I haven't done a video in a while. Need to do another one.
But there's also George's Substack, and if you really want to help with the channel, go over to shop.techtechpotato.com and you can get t-shirts and stickers and all sorts of bump that typically comes with being an influencer. This is one of the newest additions actually to the shop. I can't remember what it's on the price for, but this t-shirt I'm gonna get a few. It feels really comfy. For people wondering about shipping, the service that I've partnered with has 5 distribution centers worldwide: US, Canada, UK, Europe, Australia, I think. So wherever you are, chances are you're going to get it locally if you're in those areas without any sort of extra import. And if you do, just give us a ping and we'll sort it. We've actually sorted stuff out with the CEO of the service that I used before. Apparently some stuff ended up coming from the wrong data center from the wrong distribution center to somebody. And it's all really nice quality as well. Especially the mugs. The mugs seem to get the best rap. And one of them has a Cerebrus wafer.
Yep.
As the logo. But they're nice, chunky, and they hold a good amount of liquid as well, which is what we want in a mug. But yeah, if you do want to support the channel, those are the best ways to do it. If you want to sponsor a future episode of Tech Poutine, do get in touch.
So I would like to cover. Yep. So while we were at ISSCC, Microsoft announced the Majorana quantum computing chip, and this has been creating some amount of headlines, let me tell you. So yeah, let's
so quantum computing, broad strokes, a potential future for acceleration of certain workloads. Just like the GPU is today, just like the NPU is about to. If we can get it to work, it will provide a massively parallel system for certain types of workloads. It won't be the thing that replaces CPUs and GPUs. It won't do graphics.
Wait, so I can't get this from a gaming rig?
Not unless your gaming rig's in a milli-Kelvin room.
In an MRI machine.
Mm-hmm.
Boring.
Boring, yes. Though you may be able to crystallize one and put it in your watch or something. It won't do anything. It just look pretty. And I'll be fair, Microsoft has made it look pretty.
Yeah. Why would they make it look so pretty?
Because it's a marketing push.
Yeah.
And this is one of the criticisms. So just to back up a little bit, the big thing in quantum computing is, one, how many quantum bits or qubits do you have? Two, how long they last for, their coherency time. And then after that, what can you run on them that makes sense? And the research in this field, it's been going on for 20 years, but more recently, we've been tackling all three of those concurrently. For those of you who do watch the channel, one of my clients is IBM's Quantum division. So I have done some content with them about their strategy. And it's the one that's actually one of the most open. They're actually getting revenue out of it by offering cloud instances. And they have somewhere north of 2,800 papers now showcasing the latest research, not only in developing quantum systems, but also the stuff that you can run on them. They've had a few papers in Nature, things to do with what can be loosely described as doing two-dimensional magnetic models, which is really difficult mathematically, but easier in the quantum side. 2D transverse Ising models, if you know what they are.
I have no idea.
I did a lot of research into condensing down does that mean, and I came to the conclusion it's when you flip a magnetic bit, it has effects in 2 dimensions, and it's difficult to model.
Oh, okay.
Due to electroweak and stuff. Turns out quantum computers are really good at simulating quantum computers.
Wow, who would have thought?
Which is Google's benchmark. I have a rant about that.
Yes,
and
you rented on it on the TechTechPotato before.
Yeah, so this is Microsoft. I misread this. I thought it said Microsoft Marijuana one, and I'm not the only one.
Microsoft releases Marijuana 1.
Yes. For those of you who don't know, Majorana is a name of the researcher in the 1800s, I believe, who has a strong connection, or has a connection, maybe it's a weak connection, electroweak connection, related to what they're doing. Now, I'm going to hand it over to George because he's a physicist.
So
now a physicist.
So
you're a space physicist, not a quantum physicist.
Well, so I have my bachelor's in physics, but this is very much into the quantum field theory. I am not a quantum field theorist.
But we know people who are.
Yeah. So if I do get anything wrong, I do apologize. I'm trying my best here. But so I'll just read the press release for the first 2 paragraphs here. Microsoft today introduces the Majorana 1.
You almost said Marijuana 1.
Yes, I did. The world's first quantum chip powered by a new topological core architecture that it expects will realize quantum computers capable of solving meaningful industrial scale problems in years, not decades. It leverages the world's first topoconductor, a breakthrough type of material which can observe and control Majorana particles to produce more reliable and scalable qubits, which are the building blocks for quantum computers.
This press release has changed since yesterday.
Has it?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
For the reasons that we'll go into. But.
Okay. So
what it originally said is that we have multiple states of matter. Solid, liquid, gas, maybe even a supercritical fluid or 2.
Higgs boson go bear.
We have discovered another, a topological topological conductor.
Topoconductor.
Called a topoconductor, theorized by the physicist named Majorana, To which at that point, both George and I, and apologies in advance, said, "What the bloody fuck?"
Yeah. So I'm laughing because a topo conductor is a portmanteau of topological superconductor,
Semiconductor.
superconductor,
Oh, okay.
not semiconductor. And yeah, this is very obviously marketing here, and
Yeah.
it's
So explain what a Majorana particle is and why it's relevant here.
So a Majorana particle, as best as I understand it, is a particle that's also its antiparticle. So
What does that mean?
in matter, there's, if you've taken a physics or a chemistry course, then you would know what electrons or positrons, photon, neutrinos, bosons.
Fermions.
These are electrons,
elementary particles.
Yep.
And most of them, as far as we know, have their own antiparticle, which means that if they come in contact, they annihilate each other because it's essentially a positive and a negative coming together.
Yes. So traditionally, there's the electron, the neutron, and the proton. The probably the one that you've heard the most about before is the positron, which is the antimatter version of the electron. And it's, if they come in contact, they annihilate each other, which is why a Majorana particle is weird, because it's both a particle and it's antiparticle. So two electrons coming together.
So it's inflammable, which means both susceptible to fire and not susceptible to fire.
Yes. If two of these particles come into contact with each other, they would destroy themselves, even though they're the same particle.
The problem is they don't exist.
Yeah, they don't exist. Now,
they're theorized to exist in certain theoretical fields of physics.
Yeah, mostly in ultra high energy systems.
Imagine like super Higgs bosons.
Yeah. And
the reason why they've called it the Majorana is because they believe they have created the equivalent of a Majorana fermion in the form of a particle at the end of the nanowire. Now, kudos to them if they have. They said it's got the same properties. They've had to do a bunch of design work to get it to work. Apparently, this has been in work 17 years.
So this is not a Majorana particle. What this is
it exhibits the same properties.
Yes. So essentially, what you have is you explained it as an eaglet, and I actually really like that.
What they've taken is a nanowire, and they've reconstructed the end of the nanowire atom by atom to have specific properties. I think it was indium, gallium arsenide or something. I went over the paper yesterday. But if you construct it in a certain way, put it into what's called a quantum well, which means that you're essentially lowering...
you're forcing it into essentially a place where...
a lower quantum state.
Yeah, you're forcing it into a specific quantum state within a well.
Yeah, and then you cool it down to, as George said, millikelvin. And do they also have to apply an electrical field, or they have to apply microwave pulses to program it anyway? If you put two of them together, it creates a Dirac fermion equivalent, which is like a particle-antiparticle situation.
And these are two quasi-particles at the end of those wires that have been formed.
But you put four of them together.
Yeah, you put two. Well, no, you put two of them together and you get a Dirac fermion. You then entangle those two with another two, and you get what they're claiming behaves like a Majorana fermion,
which can exhibit behavior such that it can be used for quantum computing.
Yes.
So that is a very long and convoluted way. Because part of the issue here is they have literally had to physically create these nanowire ends atom by atom to get it to work. The device itself, as you can see in the photos here, is 7 or 8 qubits. I believe it's 8 physical, but only 7 work or something.
Okay.
And
so quantum computers have yields just like regular computers.
it's and so you might think, if for anybody who does follow the quantum computing industry, they might think, so why is this a major breakthrough? And the reason why they're considering a breakthrough is for pretty much one reason. And it's 1.5 reasons, and it really annoys me.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is that the size of the quantum well and the end of the nanowire is really, really small.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, on your hand, you can fit 1 million, and quantum computers in the future need 1 million qubits. So don't bother doing any quantum computing on stuff that won't scale to 1 million qubits on the palm of your hand. The thing is, that's pretty much all quantum computing qubits are. So, for example, IBM's qubits, you can scale to a few thousand on a chip that's about 4 inches long. So that won't scale to 1 million, but it's the one that's working right now.
Yep.
Intel has spin qubits, and because that's actually manufactured on a CMOS process, you can get millions out there. So this is not a bloody new concept of saying let's scale to 1 million. Not on top of that, I'm getting very ranty now because I'm pointing and banging the table. Doesn't take into account the bloody electronics to power the thing.
Yeah,
because those scale as well.
Yeah, those. Yeah, it's so.
The other half point that they're trying to make here is that I mentioned at the beginning that quantum qubits have a coherence time.
Yes.
So what you're doing is you're putting the quantum wave function in a state that you can use it for compute, and you don't want that wave function to collapse. So that's called the coherence time. And the longer your coherence time, the more you can do in the entangled state as a qubit. And this is, much research going on this. They're saying that due to the nature of their quantum wells, they exhibit 10 times better coherence time than other qubits in the field, which is a weird thing to state, given that there is research going on to other superconducting qubits to improve the coherence time by 1000x over the next 3 years.
Yeah. So it's very, if this works, this would be very interesting. However, this is not the first time we've seen this.
Is it not?
No, it's not.
Oh,
so,
this is news to me. George has done some research overnight.
Yeah. So in 2021, it's in the doc.
Okay.
I'm going to quote from the IEEE Spectrum.
Okay, I'll bring this up.
Major quotations on a backpedaling, Microsoft-backed quantum computer research retracted. They've published a very similar paper before and have retracted it. So, yeah, this has been.
So, yeah. In the past decade or so, researchers have detected signs of a kind of Majorana fermion known as the Majorana zero mode. This quasi-particle manifests in the form of groups of electrons and other particles behaving as single particles. And in 2018, in Nature, Microsoft-backed scientists claimed they found strong evidence. A discovery they suggested could pave the way for the powerful kind of quantum computer. Now the researchers have officially retracted this work, citing insufficient rigor. So it sounds like they now believe they have the rigor needed.
Yes.
And they've done it. Well, hang on. This is a story in 2021.
Yeah.
Retracting a 2018 paper.
Yeah.
So
and now republishing in 25.
So 7 years later, but also to that extent, they've also built it into a quantum computer.
Yes.
And a lot of people are finding the results, I don't want to say not sufficient, or not believable, but needs more data.
Yeah, it's give me more data before I start really fanboying over this.
Yeah, because there are other types of qubits in this industry that have a long history that are in the process of yielding and working.
Yeah, and I will say that this is actually, I think this actually is the first time that a topological superconductor has been made, and been used in an actual use case. but a lot of people are saying it's an interesting curiosity that should be explored more,
Mhm.
but call me when this starts scaling more and
Yeah.
more.
So the paper is in Nature. It is open access for people to read. It gets pretty dense pretty quick. It's showing here how
Yeah, and you can
but-
see if you go back up,
Mhm.
you can see how
four ends of a shoelace.
yeah, basically
How they're connected together. So yeah, if you don't know the end of a shoelace, the little plastic cover is called an iglet. So they could have called it Majorana. They could have called it the Microsoft Iglet. But
the iglet computer.
Yeah, so a lot of people were annoyed, were like show the data.
Mhm.
A lot of people said this is a lot of marketing bunk.
Yeah, here I don't know if you showed that paper, but there's also a paper on what exactly is topological superconductor is.
Yeah.
Better than MS telomere. Yeah. But yeah, it's very interesting. Expect to see more talk about this as more data comes out about it.
Yeah, that's the other thing we should highlight, which was actually brought up to us by a good friend in the room here. One of the key things in the press release is that after this demonstration, this has now unlocked the final stage of a DARPA research program to build one of these supercomputers for what looks like potential military use.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's DARPA for you. But
yeah, the
well, is it DARPA or is it ARPA?
DARPA.
Oh, I thought ARPA was still separate. Okay. But yes.
Yeah, so this is part of the Microsoft Azure blog. One of their things is reliably reading quantum information as well.
Yeah. And something.
So hang on. Let's let me. So they've got a bunch of research labs. As a result of this careful analysis, DARPA and Microsoft have executed an agreement to begin the final stage of this program. During this phase, Microsoft intends to build a fault-tolerant prototype based on topological qubits in years, not decades.
Yeah.
If this is as big as they say, there would be a lot more than DARPA getting involved for a start.
Yeah. Well, there is one other part that I would like to bring up, and that's in the paper they talk about fault-tolerant computation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys know in classical computing, there's ECC for memory or error correcting code.
Mm-hmm.
For DRAM sticks, NAND, whatever else.
SecDed, TechSec.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is that a topological superconductor sort of can have what inbuilt ECC by having a band gap between the quantum states. So a band gap is a difference in energy potential. By having this band gap between the different states, essentially where you are in that quantum well that we talked about, you can have a better fault tolerance, which is really important for quantum computing, because that's one of the things that a lot of research has gone into, is how do you better make a less faulty or more fault tolerant system.
Mm-hmm. I want to show this picture. This is how you make your Majorana zero mode.
Oh, this is the MZMs. So
it's a squiggle.
Well,
so some lines are dotted, some are fuzzy.
Yeah. So Majorana zero modes are a specific zero energy, is a certain state of the system, essentially.
Is this from The Incredibles where the guy goes 0 point energy?
Not quite. So you can tangle or you can couple 2 or 4 of the zero modes together to protect essentially the state of the electron that you're using to.
Yeah.
And So what's funny is because this is quantum, when you capture the electron and it becomes coupled to the MDM system, the state then becomes unobservable. So yeah, it's very interesting on how you would measure it, because you can't observe it, which yeah, it's
there's still a lot of questions, let's put it that way, and I've had people reach out saying, what does this mean? Is this real? The fact that Microsoft's putting so much noise behind it.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think that's the biggest gripe. I mean, the initial gripe that covers everyone is how much effort they're putting into marketing it. The second biggest gripe is physics.
Yeah. And somebody in the chat says, because if you measure it, you change its state, messing up your computation. That's yes, but that's not. It becomes like you can't observe it because of the zero modes. It's weird. But you can get a measurement out of it, but you can't observe it. Don't.
But some of the way these things work is you observe the effect it has on something else.
That's exactly what it is.
So you don't collapse its own wave function, you're collapsing the wave function of something else.
Yeah.
By looking at the interaction. So it's a proxy calculation. Yeah. We've been going for almost 2 hours right now, so let's go into our final topic. We had like another dozen things to speak about. So let's go into the final one, and this is because this is somewhat fun. And we're not talking about the iPhone 60 just because it's a new launch. There's something very specific here. Now, the 16E, I believe, is essentially the update to the smallest phone in Apple's line, but it's still 6.1 inches.
Yeah.
So you have 6.1 inch small, 6.4 inch medium, 6.7 inch big. So interesting. But it's USB-C, Face ID. It doesn't have a home button. Starts at $599. It has the latest A18 processor, or whatever the latest one is. I sometimes forget. And it's got Apple's design ID. It's a single camera model, right? But what's the important thing here, George?
It uses Apple modem.
So for the longest time, Apple has used Qualcomm modems in all of its smartphones. Because essentially most chips that have a Qualcomm SoC or a MediaTek SoC, the modem is embedded in the SoC. Because those companies own modems and they integrate the IP. There's a trade-off. It takes die area. You're mixing some digital with analog a little bit, so you have to manage that. Then you also have the whole analog side. You get wave shapers and stuff and whatever from Corvo and companies like that. Apple, because they never had their own modem, you had to buy them in. So it became a separate chip on package. You have to do some specific coupling. There's the power trade-off for it. It does mean that Apple's SoCs were easier to manufacture because they're smaller. And we often saw this, why are Qualcomm's smartphone SoCs 20 square millimeters bigger? Because they have a modem inside. That sort of thing. So one of the things Apple likes to do is go full stack with its designs. So everything from the chassis manufacturing to the display and everything in between. We know this. Apple likes to control supply chains. And 5 years ago,
I thought it was like 7.
They acquired the assets for Intel's 5G modem. So at the time, 5G modem was in significant development. In reality, we have Qualcomm, MediaTek, Samsung, and Huawei are the major 5G modem players.
I think Broadcom as well.
I don't think so. No,
maybe.
Broadcom's Wi-Fi.
Okay, yes.
And MediaTek Wi-Fi. As it pertains to 4G, Qualcomm had a massive stronghold across the market. 5G has been different. a little bit because we have 5G in two flavors.
Yeah.
One that's called millimeter wave and one that is called sub 6 gigahertz. The best way I think to know this is one is called 5G fast,
Mhm.
which is like more for arena and
Mhm.
stadiums when you got 50,000 people. But the distance isn't that great, but the
Mhm.
bandwidth is better. Or you have 5G wide, which is essentially 4G on steroids with features such as supporting many more users.
Yep.
Most of the world started with 5G wide first, which is sub 6. The US was unique. I think a couple of other countries also decided to go to 5G fast first.
Yes.
And this caused a sort of
split.
delay in the US getting 5G adoption. It's all fixed now. Most of the world runs on sub 6, and you're lucky if you find venues that support millimeter wave. Also, the antennas for millimeter wave or 5G fast are quite bulky, and so you have to have specific devices. Intel at the time, obviously, were having super troubles with 10 nanometer, and so offloaded for $1 billion, I believe, all their 5G IP to Apple. And with the expectation, and lots of publications at the time said, this means Apple's going to create their own modem for 5G phones, and that's going to kick Qualcomm out of the market, or at least Qualcomm's business with Apple is going to kick out the market. And people expected that to happen in 2 years because surely Apple can fix what Intel can't do.
Yeah, that wasn't a good bet now, was it?
Part of me thinks that Apple just scrapped everything and started
new.
And it took them several years to realize. So whether or not, I mean, that's just a little bit of speculation. We don't know whether this Apple built modem, which is a separate chip, it's not integrated in the SoC yet, is derived from the IP acquired during the purchase of Intel's assets. It does only support 5G wide. It doesn't support 5G fast. Again, part of that is cost as well. This is a $600 smartphone. But it, I assume it's built at TSMC.
They never said. They just said 7 nanometer transceivers, which I believe is a first.
Okay. I don't think it's a first. Maybe it is for them.
Well, I did check, and apparently the latest Qualcomm
is on 5.
No, the transceiver themselves are on 14.
Huh.
And it's not TSMC, it's Samsung.
Yeah.
So they're claiming that it's the first 7 nanometer transistor. Transceiver, excuse me. So yeah, interesting. And they didn't say who's 7 nanometer. Considering that Qualcomm is building on Samsung 14, it's possible, theoretically, that this is actually an Intel process. They didn't say, but it's theoretically possible that the modem was made on Intel 7.
Yeah. So here, unfortunately, The Verge never actually mentioned the C1 at all. But in the press release, it says, and the new Apple C1, the first cellular modem designed by, so they even say designed by Apple, but if you own the IP, it's now designed by you, regardless. It doesn't give any more details than that, really, because what's interesting here is we all know about, Qualcomm's modem performance versus Samsung's modem performance, the Shannon modems versus, the X series. So the fact that we now have a new entrant into the 5G space offers a lot of questions. And if it's IP that can be integrated into Apple's leading edge,
well,
the digital side,
I would hesitate to call them a new entrant because Apple is Apple, right? They are their own business, and
no. But if it works, that reduces Qualcomm's Apple revenue.
Yes, yeah, that I would agree with.
From that
I would hesitate to call them a new player in the wider market because they likely aren't going to sell this to other people.
No. Of course, this is just for internal use, just as everything Apple does is. There has been speculation that this will extend to Wi-Fi, as in they will start building their own Wi-Fi chips as well.
So kick out Broadcom.
Yeah,
interesting
from that market as well. that I think at my last check, Apple has 160,000 employees,
Oh, so more than Intel.
more than Intel. But yeah, it's there's 5G GPS satellite. Does it have satellite communications? Let me
I
double
would.
check.
Is it mentioned in the press release? If it's not, then honestly, maybe not.
When outside of cellular and Wi-Fi, it has ground-basing satellite features. So that's supplied by somebody else. That won't be part of the modem, I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's got Apple Intelligence for $600 device.
AI.
Yeah, and I think pre-orders start tomorrow for shipping next week. But yeah, no, the reason why we wanted to include it, I just realized I hadn't switched tabs. Sorry, everyone. I was scrolling through Apple's without switching tabs on the stream. Expanding the benefits of the Apple Silicon, C1 is the first modem designed by Apple and the most power-efficient modem ever on an iPhone. Surely in an iPhone.
What's a simple language change?
I mean, the last time I saw a chip on a phone, it was an Intel engineer who'd strapped a Xeon Phi, a 64-core massive chip. So yeah,
if we had a potato chip, I would break out my phone and put a potato chip on it as a joke. But
this is basically a screw you.
Yeah,
to
Qualcomm. Yeah.
So,
and if they make their own Wi-Fi chips, it's gonna be a screw you to Broadcom.
Yep. Anyway, that's yeah, that's Apple. I mean, I sometimes get tempted to get one, but then I just don't want to deal with the ecosystem and the people who own them. But I want your messages to be green or blue.
Oh God, I hate that so much.
I'm too old to deal with that stuff. But yeah, I'm at the age where Facebook is just full of minion memes, so I don't use it. But I'm also not young enough to be enveloped by the Apple ecosystem and be browbeaten.
Well, here's the thing. I, in theory, am young enough, but I have a Pixel, so
yeah, it's I do need the new MediaTek stuff. So, do we have any questions? Our great person on the back end, Dom, has been curating them, so let's go over a few.
Actually, just before the questions,
okay,
I would like to do a 60-second laugh session. Humane was bought by HP, which was not on my 2025 bingo card.
So it explain to everybody what Humane.
So Humane was an AI company that made an $800 health pen. Well, those are now all useless. In 10 days, it will effectively be made obsolete and completely dead. Yeah. So this was not on my 2025 bingo card. Apparently, HP acquired the company for 115 million. Humane had raised 230 million.
Yeah. So HP's history of acquiring dead companies continues. Also, wasn't the whole thing that the whole AI behind this pin was just simply a ChatGPT subscription?
Yes, it was just OpenAI.
So you'd pay for the device, and then you'd also pay a monthly fee.
Yep.
Which would be just slightly more expensive than a ChatGPT subscription.
Yep.
You could buy it still until a few days ago. Yeah, it
was 800 up front and then $24 a month.
Yeah, they're buying the IP, probably not the people.
No, they're buying the people.
Clearly has no interest in its current hardware business.
No. If you go to the press release, I believe up.
Hang on, no, I want to say Humane was seeking a $1 billion buyout after only receiving 10,000 orders. And it's gone to an eighth of that.
Yeah.
Is that the press release?
Yes. If you
This is the one from Humane.
Yeah. So they are actually buying the people.
Okay.
They're basically just buying out the company, as far as
Yeah.
I can tell.
And discontinuing all public-facing services.
Yep.
HP's scale, global reach, and operational excellence, combined with our design-led approach, integration technology, and engineering expertise, will redefine workforce productivity.
Yeah.
Though you still have to buy an ink subscription.
Yeah. It's
So, yeah, not a fan.
Yeah. No.
Whatever. So let's go over some of these questions. Yeah, we addressed things like nanosheets and two-dimensional transistors. Gregors says about node naming, kind of like 1-inch imaging sensors don't mean 1-inch diagonal. It refers to the diameter of an imaging tube with the same active area. Yep. Why is SRAM so important? Because you've got to have memory.
Yep.
How does so with respect to the die on yarn integration, we didn't play enough on yarn a bit. How does it stick to the fabric?
Doesn't it get weaved in?
But so yeah, the threads get weaved in. Part of that, I did ask for about things like washability and waterproofness, and the researcher again is somebody doing the PhD said, yeah, no, they're looking into things like conformal coating and that sort of stuff. Mr. Vivitis says, how isn't silicon emulation a larger topic? It can be if you go down that rabbit hole. Unfortunately, none of it is open source. Not much is open source. Pretty much everything is behind an NDA.
Yeah, and frankly, it would probably make my head hurt. Yeah.
Renormalized out of it said, Jim Keller said quantum computers are pixie dusts, while Machu Kaku said quantum computers are impossible. They exist.
Yeah. Like,
what do you want me to say? Jim Keller did have a tweet saying Intel could easily be a $1 trillion company, and I know we haven't covered it on this episode, but yeah, there's some things going down with Intel that is causing stock price to go up and down.
Yeah,
and stuff.
So, Crispy in the Crispy in the chat said, so will Intel fab Celestial themselves, as they said they would? The answer to that is who knows.
So the question is, will next generation GPUs be fabbed at Intel? And the answer from the CEO of Intel Products, Michelle Johnson Holthouse, basically said the foundry has to earn my business.
Oh, interesting.
No, but she says that about everything. That's the generic base answer.
Right?
Okay.
That's slightly less
for
interesting,
every product, foundry has to earn the business versus competition. Now, earning the business through performance, density, die size, or availability due to supply chain, or cost. Yeah,
why not all three?
Yeah, all of
them.
Like
if it's a good product or a good process with availability, with good cost characteristics, like why wouldn't?
Well, exactly. It's always a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
It's you go to TSMC because you get these characteristics, but it's this price and this is your lead time. But if you want something that's quicker, maybe you're willing to accept something that doesn't perform as well or has other benefits in, say, advanced packaging rather than compute. Or maybe it is good compute, but it does this, that, and the other, and you need different. Yeah, this is what we mean by not only design technology optimization, but system technology optimization. The thing is with Celestial, that decision would have been made already.
Yeah.
Because if we expect it to come out, say, middle to end of next year, the chip is designed with a node in mind because you need the design rules for the node you're using.
And while Intel talked about a sea of fobs, or they talked about it at the Intel Tech Tour,
right?
About how Lion Cove was 99% node agnostic. Well, that just means that the actual IP itself is node agnostic.
No, So the point is that they were using industry standard tools.
Yeah, but people were taking that as, oh, you can just move it from one node to
No.
the other. No, you still have to. You have to still design to that node's characteristics, and
Even
you have
if it's
to make
industry standard, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not as simple as snap somebody's fingers in and you're suddenly on a new node.
So some of the talks this week at the conference we've been at have been around working with external partners to create customized logic blocks for particular process nodes for specific development of specific chips.
Yep.
I think one chip said we had over 250 custom logic blocks.
Yep.
As a result, with a partnership with the University of Bonn or something
Mhm.
over the course of 3 years. So
super chat from Dragon Balls D.
again,
Again,
good to
great
see you.
name. Heard an interesting idea about making FPGAs on GlobalFoundries 12 FDX node. FPGAs are big and power hungry, but this may offer a solution. Similar power efficiency versus 7 nanometer at a fraction of the cost. Could this work? So GlobalFoundries 12
Doesn't
FDX
exist.
one doesn't exist at the moment, or hasn't been productized yet.
Correct.
But it's also a FD-SOI node.
FD-SOI.
Thank you. FD-SOI.
Fully depleted silicon on insulator.
Yeah. I don't know how that would take for I don't know how an FPGA would.
An FPGA we find. The problem is that there are 3 markets for FPGAs. One super high end, one
Mhm.
mid-range, one low end. The mid-range has only just started to use 16. And part of the reason is you design these products and they exist in the ecosystem for 20 years. So you need something that's suitable, stable, yields, but is also configurable over that time, perhaps to be optimized. Now, the leading edge stuff, like the Agilex or the Xilinx Versal, are all made in super leading edge nodes.
Yeah.
7, 5, and probably by next year 3.
Yeah.
The Versals being used by, say, Synopsys in their new simulation tools are all built on 7 nanometer. The previous generations, the VU19Ps,
those are 12s, if I remember correctly. 12 nanometer.
Are they?
Yep.
I thought they were 7.
No, Versal 7.
VU19P process.
But if I remember correctly,
but yeah, 16.
Yeah,
14,
16. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me.
So there is no market for large
FPGAs on 12.
Large FPGAs that aren't bleeding edge.
Yeah.
Right. It's also a matter of scale. You don't sell many of them.
So let me rephrase this question a little bit. FPGAs on GlobalFoundries 22 FDX. Opinions on that
already exist.
Oh, do they?
So FPGA companies, we all know the major 2, Altera, Xilinx, now AMD. Altera's, now partially IPO'd back. Then you have Lattice, right? Then after that, you have a bunch of smaller companies.
The one that's coming to my head is Achronix.
So Achronix has a really good partnership with Intel, because Intel's die sort, die prep stuff that I saw in Malaysia, was that in 23? There was Achronix FPGAs everywhere.
Interesting.
Right? All in their test equipment. And that's, so... and there's a bunch of other, very few of them play in the high, super high end, at really only 2. Achronix is one of those weird things. Is I think the reason why they have a big FPGA is because Intel said, we want you to design FPGA.
Okay.
Right. If you look at the companies that use FPGAs, like one called Positron AI that we met at Supercomputing, who's just raised a bunch of money. We also saw Denoisha.
Yeah.
Right. They're just using standard off-the-shelf Intel and Xilinx FPGAs.
It was interesting that it was Achronix that Intel was using for their FPGAs and not Altera, considering that they own them.
I think it's partly just because of legacy and stuff. So yeah, Achronix, for example, builds FPGAs in TSMC 7. They also have embedded FPGAs and accelerator cards.
But back onto they already exist.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know who, like what company?
So
Is-
remind me what. Train
Who's
of
making FPGAs on Global Foundries 22 FDX?
Who? This is.
Oh my God, Ian. Ian is pulling up ChatGPT to ask it the question of who's using 22 FDX to fab FPGAs.
I don't know. It's. Yeah, it says several have. Quick Logic, Oh,
Wait, really?
So it says here Acronics,
Oh,
but it's their IP blocks.
okay. Flex Logic, Microchip.
Yeah, Microchip. There we go.
Okay.
Oh,
And
Microchip are exploring 22 FDX as an option. So, as always,
and Flex Logic is IP as well on FDX.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the one?
Yep.
So the only one that I see here is Quick Logic's EOS S3 platform.
Yeah, though you do have to double confirm that's correct because that came from GPT.
Yep.
So it's yeah. It's one of those things. I do have an interview with Lattice's executives that went live on the channel, and we do cover things like open source FPGAs and development and stuff. So he does have a few answers there. You're looking at the EOS 3.
Yes, I'm trying to find where it says the node.
It may not. But with that, we're going to head out because we are definitely taking way too much of PC World's time, and many thanks for letting us use your offices. I can see you've been churning through emails there, Adam.
Yeah, I'm actually getting a lot of work done over here.
You should come by more often and annoy you.
Yeah, please.
It's been fun, and thank you all for watching. We have to digest this week because, like I say, there's a bunch of stuff. Like I said, Mercedes putting HBM in cars. That was a thing.
And you talking with Francois Pierre Noel?
I have a video idea in mind. And Dragon Balls D gives us another $5. Thank you. Blackwell is definitely. Wait, what was that?
Sorry.
Laughing at the name.
Oh.
No, the rest of the question.
Yeah, Blackwell is definitely a GPU generation all time. Will gamers ever get tired of choking? Yeah. I misread that. I thought he was talking about somebody called Will Gamers. Because there's a guy called Will Smith who works here.
And capital G gamer. That's how you know it's the serious gamer.
Yeah. But with that demonetization of the channel, thank you very much for watching. We'll catch you next week where we can perhaps go into some of the other stuff we wanted to talk about today.
And we've been pretty good about doing this weekly. So
yeah,
go on us.
For now.
Yeah.
For now. Let's go. Awesome. So yeah, thank you everyone, and we'll see you next week.
In this episode of Tech Poutine.
You've got that down.
Oh, sorry.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm late.